At my 42nd wedding anniversary, my husband, Arthur, brought a 20-year-old girl home. He introduced Seraphina as his new companion, and she moved into our house, sleeping in our guest room. I just smiled, watching them, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. They started planning their future, talking about investments and retirement, all with my money. But they forgot one crucial detail. My silent observation turned into a quiet storm. Follow my story, like and share, and let us know where you're listening from. My name is Eleanor. I was 65, married to Arthur, 67, for 42 years. 42 years. It felt like a lifetime, a tapestry woven with shared dreams, small fights, quiet routines, and the unspoken language of two people who knew each other inside out. Or so I thought. Our life was comfortable, predictable. Arthur had built a successful manufacturing business, and I had managed our home, raised our daughter, Clara, and supported him every step of the way. We had our patterns: morning coffee together, evening news, an early dinner. That was our life. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the pattern shattered. Arthur walked in, not alone as usual, but with a girl. A very young girl. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair was long and styled, her clothes trendy, far too youthful for our quiet suburban home. My heart dropped, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I stared, speechless, as Arthur introduced her. Eleanor, this is Seraphina. Seraphina, this is Eleanor. His voice was too casual, almost dismissive. Seraphina offered a small, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked me up and down, a look that made me feel like an exhibit in a museum, something old and forgotten. Arthur didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He put a hand on Seraphina's lower back, a possessive gesture that hit me harder than any punch. Seraphina will be staying with us for a while, he announced, his gaze flicking to me, daring me to question him. Staying. In our home. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mind reeled. What did he mean, staying? For how long? And who was she, really? I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but my voice wouldn't come. I simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a world turning upside down. That evening, dinner was a spectacle. Our old wooden dining table, where we had shared countless meals, suddenly felt alien. Seraphina, with an air of entitlement that grated on my nerves, slid into my usual chair at the head of the table, the one Arthur always pulled out for me. Arthur, instead of correcting her, settled into the seat next to her, leaving me to take the chair opposite them. Seraphina chattered incessantly, her voice dripping with a false sweetness that was almost sickening. She asked Arthur about his day, laughed at his jokes, occasionally glanced at me with a condescending pity that made my blood boil. I felt like an old piece of furniture, a relic that had outlived its usefulness, silently observing the unfolding drama in my own home. I picked at my food, the taste like ash in my mouth. Later that night, I was in the kitchen, pretending to clean, when I heard their voices from the living room. Arthur's low rumble, then Seraphina's lighter tone. I edged closer, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and indignation. She's always been a bit quiet, hasn't she? Seraphina purred. Arthur chuckled, a sound that twisted my gut. Yes, she's harmless, he said, his voice casual, dismissive. Keeps to herself mostly. Won't be a problem. Harmless. Keeps to herself. His words were a cold knife, twisting into the deepest parts of my being. 42 years, and this was how he saw me. A harmless, quiet fixture. An insignificant presence. He had completely underestimated me. The next few nights, the guest bedroom, which had always been a temporary haven for visiting relatives, became Arthur's permanent residence. Our marital bed, the one we had shared for over 4 decades, felt vast and cold without him. Each night, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, a profound sense of loneliness and betrayal washing over me. I tried to make sense of it, to understand what had driven Arthur to this. Was it a midlife crisis? A desperate grasp at youth? Whatever it was destroying everything we had built. A week later, Arthur made another pronouncement. Seraphina will be staying indefinitely, he stated during breakfast, not looking at me. And she needs a proper room. Eleanor, I need you to clear out Clara's old room for her. Clara's room, our daughter's sanctuary, filled with her childhood memories, her trophies, her books. It was a space I had kept pristine, a place she would always have when she came home. My breath caught in my throat. This was a direct invasion, a final obliteration of my past and my daughter's place in this house. Seraphina, sitting beside Arthur, gave a small, triumphant smirk. I felt a surge of fury, but I bit it back. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and I needed to understand what was truly happening. I nodded again, silently, a silent promise forming in my mind that they wouldn't see coming. Over the next few days, I tried to keep my ears open, observing them. Seraphina was always by Arthur's side, constantly touching his arm, laughing at his most mundane jokes. They spent hours together in Arthur's study, which used to be a shared space. I started to hear snippets of their conversations. Not just flirtatious banter, but something more. Investment portfolios, Seraphina would say, her voice bright. Retirement planning, Arthur would respond, sounding serious. We need to optimize the assets. Assets. My assets. Our assets. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just an affair. There was something else at play. One evening, I overheard Arthur on the phone in his study, the door slightly ajar. His voice was hushed, urgent. Yes, everything's going according to plan, he murmured into the receiver. She has no idea. Completely oblivious. Once I move everything over, we'll be set. Absolutely set. Move everything over. Oblivious. My heart hammered against my ribs. It all clicked into place, or at least, a terrifying part of it did. This was about money. About our money. That night, after they had gone to bed, I crept into Arthur's study. My hands trembled as I sat at his desk, powering on his laptop. I knew his password. It was always the same. My fingers flew across the keyboard, opening his email. I searched. Seraphina. Dozens of emails popped up, but not love letters. These were financial documents, legal forms, discussions about bank accounts, property deeds, and business shares. My eyes scanned frantically, piecing together their insidious plot. They were planning to secure their financial future with my money, with our money. They were going to strip me bare. Then I saw it. An old email, dated 5 years prior. It was from our lawyer, confirming a series of transactions. My vision blurred as I read the details. 5 years ago, Arthur, worried about potential lawsuits against his business and seeking to minimize estate taxes, had transferred ownership of everything. The house, the business, all the investment accounts, even our beloved lake cabin, into my name. Eleanor's name. For tax protection, he had said at the time. A shrewd move, I had thought. A sign of his trust. I closed the laptop, my mind reeling. The screen went dark, reflecting my stunned face. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But it was quickly overshadowed by something new, something unexpected. A surge of power, cold and clear, washed over me. They thought I was harmless, oblivious. They thought they could take everything from me. But Arthur had made one monumental mistake. He had given me the keys to the kingdom. The task of clearing out Clara's room felt like an excavation of my own heart. Every item I touched was a memory, a tangible piece of our shared past. Clara's first-grade art project, a lopsided clay pot painted bright blue, still sat on her old desk. Her collection of fantasy novels, worn from countless readings, lined the bookshelf. The ballet slippers she wore for her first recital, still dusted with rosin, were tucked in a shoebox. Each photograph I carefully placed in a box, each sweater I folded, each teddy bear I wrapped in tissue paper, felt like I was burying a piece of my own life, putting it away forever to make space for a stranger. It wasn't just clearing a room. It was erasing a life, our life, from the very walls of my home. The pain was a dull, constant ache, a heavy weight that settled in my chest. Seraphina, of course, was there, supervising. She leaned against the door frame, her arms crossed, a critical expression on her young face. "You're really too sentimental, Eleanor," she said, her voice lilting with a fake concern that did not hide her impatience. "No one needs all this old stuff." She then launched into a detailed plan for the room's transformation. "We'll paint it mint green," she announced, as if deciding on a new color for a public restroom. "And we need to get rid of this awful floral wallpaper. It's so dated." My cherished antique vanity, a gift from my grandmother, was dismissed as clutter. The handmade quilt I had sewn for Clara, depicting characters from her favorite storybooks, was deemed childish and destined for the donation pile. I watched, my hands still clutching a framed photo of Clara at her high school graduation, as she casually tossed aside items that held decades of meaning to me. The disrespect was a physical blow, yet I maintained my outward composure, a quiet mask, hiding the storm raging inside. Arthur, true to form, fully endorsed Seraphina's grand plans. "I want you to feel at home here, Seraphina," he told her, his voice soft and indulgent, as if speaking to a fragile child. He opened his wallet, handing her a significant sum of money. "Don't hold back. Make it exactly how you want it." The words twisted in my gut. Make it her home. This was my home. Our home. The one I had nurtured for 42 years, but to Arthur, it was simply a stage for his new life. And I was merely a bystander, an extra who had overstayed her welcome. I smiled faintly. A tight, thin line that gave away nothing. My acceptance, they believed, was genuine. They had no idea it was a shield, protecting a growing resolve. A few days later, Arthur announced we would be having dinner guests. Not just any guests, but two of his wealthiest clients, a couple known for their substantial investments and social influence. It was clear this was a crucial business dinner. I started planning the menu, considering their preferences, thinking of the classic dishes I always prepared. But Seraphina swiftly intervened. "Oh no, Eleanor," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We can't serve your usual casserole to Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. They're used to a certain standard." She then declared she would arrange for gourmet catering from an upscale restaurant downtown. Arthur, predictably, agreed without a second thought, praising her initiative. My cooking, once celebrated by Arthur and our friends, was now deemed inadequate. Another part of my established role, systematically erased. The dinner itself was a performance. Seraphina was in her element, flitting around the dining room, directing the caterers, her every movement designed to project an image of effortless elegance and sophisticated charm. She acted as the undisputed hostess, her hand often resting intimately on Arthur's arm, her gaze lingering on him with an affection that felt staged and sickening. She engaged the Petersons with practiced ease, even venturing into discussions about investment portfolios and market trends, speaking with an authority that I knew was rehearsed, parrot fashion from her conversations with Arthur. She even made a point to mention how much she was learning from Arthur about business, painting herself as an eager, intelligent partner. Then came the moment that truly solidified her narrative. Seraphina, leaning in towards the Petersons, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, said, "Arthur really needs stability at home to focus on expanding the business. It's so important for him to have a calm, supportive environment right now. Wouldn't you agree?" She subtly implied that I, his wife of 4 decades, was somehow an impediment to his success, while she was the key to his future growth. Arthur, who was 67 and had been talking about retirement for years, simply nodded along, a complacent smile on his face. The audacity of her statement, the complete rewriting of our history and his future, was breathtaking. After the guests finally left, their compliments still echoing in the hushed house, Seraphina and Arthur retired to the living room. I lingered in the kitchen, clearing up, and heard their triumphant voices. "To a successful evening," Arthur toasted, clinking glasses with Seraphina. "They loved you, darling. You really sealed the deal." Seraphina giggled, pleased with herself. "And those liquidated assets will be perfect for that vacation property in Florida, won't they, Arthur?" Liquidated assets, vacation properties, Florida. My heart squeezed. They were openly discussing their future, their stolen future, built on the very wealth that legally belonged to me. My mind was a whirlwind, but a cold, clear thought cut through the chaos. I needed to confirm everything. After they had both gone to bed, I slipped into Arthur's study again. This time, I went straight to the old wall safe, hidden behind a large painting. I remembered the combination, numbers I had known for decades. The heavy door swung open with a soft click. Inside, neatly organized, were all the essential documents. I pulled them out, one by one, the deed to our house, the one Clara grew up in, the certificates for Arthur's business shares, the detailed statements for all our investment accounts, the title for the lake cabin, our family's cherished retreat. Every single one of them, without exception, was legally in Eleanor's name. I remembered Arthur's casual joke from 5 years ago when he proposed the transfer. "It'll all be yours anyway if I drop dead first, Elle," he had said with a laugh, trying to lighten the seriousness of the tax planning discussion. "Just makes things simpler." He had intended it as a strategic move, a protective measure for our assets. Never imagining I would be anything but his loyal wife, oblivious to his betrayals. I carefully placed the documents back into the safe, the cool metal, a stark contrast to the burning anger in my veins. I locked it, the click echoing with a sense of finality. Seraphina and Arthur were building their elaborate dreams, planning their lavish future, on a foundation that, legally, absolutely belonged to me. They thought they had me cornered, helpless. They were wrong. My quiet acceptance wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And my silence was not a surrender, but a growing storm. The redecoration of Clara's room was just the beginning. Seraphina, with Arthur's full backing, set her sights on the living room. It was a space I had carefully curated over decades, filled with warmth and memories. Our wedding photos, Clara's school portraits, snapshots from family vacations. Each picture held a story. Seraphina unceremoniously took them down, replacing them with stark, abstract modern art pieces she claimed were more sophisticated. My favorite armchair, a comfortable, worn velvet piece where I loved to read, was hauled away and replaced with a gleaming, metallic exercise bike. "For fitness, Eleanor," Seraphina chirped, as if she were doing me a favor. "It's important to stay current." The room, once a reflection of our family life, now felt cold, impersonal, and utterly alien. Then came the kitchen. One morning, I found Seraphina rummaging through my cabinets, pulling out dishes and rearranging everything. "Honestly, Eleanor," she sighed dramatically, holding up a chipped mug that Clara had painted for me as a child. "Everything here is so stuck in the past, just like you." She rearranged my neatly organized spices, moved my grandmother's porcelain tea set to a hidden corner, and replaced my everyday dinnerware with sleek, minimalist plates she bought online. The kitchen, once my sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. Every corner a reminder of her invasion. Through it all, I maintained my silence. I offered no arguments, no complaints, no visible signs of distress. I let them believe I was weak, a compliant old woman who would simply fade into the background. I observed. I listened. And I planned. My quiet acceptance was a calculated mask, allowing them to drop their guard, to reveal the full extent of their treachery. Arthur, emboldened by Seraphina's presence and my apparent submission, began to openly criticize me. It started subtly, a raised eyebrow at my sensible shoes, a dismissive wave at my comfortable sweater. Soon, it escalated. "Eleanor, why do you always wear those muted colors?" he'd ask, his eyes sweeping over my outfit with disdain. "Seraphina always looks so vibrant, so put together." He critiqued my hairstyle, my choice of television shows, even the way I walked. "You could learn a thing or two from Seraphina," he told me one morning over coffee, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. "Especially when it comes to appearances in the business world. First impressions matter." His words stung, cutting deep. Appearances in the business world. I remembered the early days, when Arthur was just starting his manufacturing company. I was by his side, working long hours, doing everything from answering phones to managing inventory. I wore sensible clothes then, too. Practical trousers, comfortable shirts, shoes that could stand up to long days on the factory floor. We'd eat takeout dinners together in his cramped office, dreaming of the future, building this business from the ground up. He had praised my hard work, my dedication, my sensible approach. Now, that past was conveniently forgotten, replaced by an image of a glamorous, youthful companion who understood the business world better than I ever could. The irony was almost unbearable. The arguments between Seraphina and Arthur grew more frequent, their voices drifting from his study, sometimes even late at night. One evening, as I pretended to read in the living room, I heard a heated exchange. Seraphina's voice was sharp, laced with frustration. "Arthur, what is taking so long?" she demanded. "You promised. We need to get these things moved. I'm tired of waiting." Arthur's voice was defensive, a rare sound. "It's complicated, Seraphina. There are tax implications, legal formalities. It's not as simple as just signing a paper." Seraphina's response was icy, cutting through his excuses. "Or is it that you're stalling, Arthur? Is Eleanor becoming a problem? Is she finally figuring things out?" My breath hitched. They were openly discussing me, my supposed ignorance. Arthur's reply was immediate, confident, and utterly damning. No, Seraphina. Don't be ridiculous. Eleanor doesn't question anything. Never has. She trusts me completely." I stifled a bitter laugh, a hollow, mirthless sound that would have terrified them if they had heard it. He was right. For 42 years, I had trusted him completely. I had given him my unwavering faith, my support, my entire being. But that trust, once a solid rock, had crumbled to dust the day Seraphina walked through our door. It was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. His words, intended to reassure her, only confirmed the depth of his betrayal and their underestimation of me. A few days later, Arthur made another grand announcement. "We're going to modernize the entire house," he declared over a surprisingly quiet breakfast, starting with the master bedroom. "It's time for a complete overhaul. Our master bedroom, the room where we had shared 42 years of memories, whispered secrets, comforting silences, the quiet intimacy of a long marriage. The idea of Seraphina having a hand in transforming that sacred space filled me with a deep, chilling rage. But I simply looked at Arthur, my expression blank. "Whatever you think is best, Arthur," I said, my voice even. Calm. My quiet words masked a fierce determination, a cold resolve that was growing stronger with every insult, every act of disrespect. Later, I heard Seraphina eagerly discussing her plans with Arthur. "And once we restructure the investment accounts," she said, her voice giddy with anticipation, "we can really turn this place into something spectacular. Restructure the investment accounts." The phrase echoed in my mind, a subtle hint of their ongoing machinations. I smiled to myself, a small, knowing smile that went unseen. Restructure them, indeed. It would happen, I mentally vowed, but not in the way they expected. It would happen, and it would be sooner than either of them could possibly imagine. 3 weeks had passed since Seraphina's arrival, and I had perfected my art of invisibility. I moved through my own home like a ghost, a silent observer in the drama unfolding around me. My placid demeanor, my quiet acceptance of their changes, seemed to convince them that I was harmless, barely present. But beneath the surface, my mind was a hive of activity, constantly observing, cataloging, and planning. Each condescending remark, each discarded family heirloom, fueled a quiet fire within me. My afternoon walks became a new routine. They believed I was simply enjoying the fresh air, perhaps seeking solace from the upheaval. In truth, these walks led me to the downtown office of Margaret Reynolds, a college friend I hadn't seen in years. Maggie, as everyone called her, had become one of the top divorce attorneys in the state, known for her sharp mind and tenacious spirit. When I finally sat across from her, pouring out the convoluted story of Arthur, Seraphina, and the chilling financial scheme. Maggie listened with a focused intensity, occasionally jotting notes. "Eleanor," Maggie said, her voice firm. "What you're describing is clear-cut elder abuse. Emotional manipulation, isolation, and financial exploitation. Even if he hasn't physically taken the money yet, the intent and actions are already there." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "But he hasn't taken anything yet. All the assets are still legally in my name." Maggie leaned forward, her expression serious. "That's your leverage, Eleanor. But it also means he might try to force you to sign things, to transfer them back to him or directly to Seraphina. He'll use his charm, his threats, whatever he thinks will work. You need to be prepared." She then laid out a clear plan. "You must meticulously document everything: times, dates, exact conversations. Take photos of the changes in the house, especially anything sentimental they discard. Keep records of any suspicious emails or texts you might find. We need irrefutable evidence of their intent and their actions." I returned home, my head buzzing with Maggie's advice. My docile performance continued. A flawless act. I watched as more of my life was systematically dismantled. My grandmother's antique quilt, a wedding gift, disappeared from the guest bedroom. A vase I had bought on our honeymoon was replaced by a cold, ceramic sculpture Seraphina found more tasteful. Each loss was a small sting, but it hardened my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, what was rightfully Clara's. Then came the announcement about the lake cabin, our cherished refuge for 30 years. "We're going to sell the cabin, Eleanor," Arthur said one evening, without a trace of remorse. "Seraphina needs more capital for her investment research. It's a prime property, high demand." My heart ached. That cabin was more than just a piece of property. It was where Clara learned to swim, where we spent countless summers, where Arthur and I had scattered my parents' ashes beneath the ancient oak tree. It was a place steeped in family history, in life and death. I looked at him, my voice unwavering, almost detached. "Whatever you think is best, Arthur." "Seraphina, of course," chimed in, her voice dripping with pseudo-financial acumen. "It just makes financial sense, Eleanor. Property values have tripled in that area. It's an excellent time to liquidate that asset." Liquidate that asset. They spoke of our memories, our sacred family haven, as if it were nothing more than a number on a spreadsheet. I mentally added this to my growing list of grievances, the callousness of it stinging more than any direct insult. Later, I walked out to the maple tree in our front yard, its leaves just beginning to turn golden. I remembered planting it with Arthur, a young sapling, on Clara's first birthday. We had talked about watching it grow, about Clara playing beneath its shade, about sharing quiet moments there in our old age. How had the man who helped me plant this tree become such a stranger? How had he forgotten the dreams we shared, the life we built? The next morning, their conversation drifted from the kitchen. "With the cabin sale," Seraphina began, "we can finally look at that condo in Naples, Florida. Beachfront." "Arthur. Imagine." Arthur chuckled. "Sounds perfect, darling. Our escape. Escape. From me. From our life. From everything." I picked up the phone and called Clara. "Just calling to say hello, sweetheart," I said, forcing a cheerful note into my voice. "How are things?" She chatted happily about her job, her plans. She asked about Arthur. "He's fine, dear," I said, a little too quickly. "Just busy. I'm a bit tired today, so I think I'll just relax." I couldn't bring myself to shatter her image of her father. Not yet. Not until I had a plan, a way to protect her from the fallout. This was no longer just about me and Arthur. This was about Clara's inheritance, her legacy, everything I had worked for and sacrificed to secure for her. A hardened resolve settled deep within my bones. That evening, with renewed purpose, I meticulously copied every critical document: deeds, investment statements, marriage certificates, tax returns from the past 5 years, every piece of paper that proved legal ownership, every document that would be vital to my case. I packed the originals into a fireproof bag and rented a separate safety deposit box at a different bank, far from Arthur's reach. As I returned, I overheard Seraphina in the study, her voice insistent. "Arthur, when are you going to introduce me to your financial advisor, George Davies? We need to get him on board with our plans." Arthur's response was a placating murmur. "Soon, darling, soon." Lying awake that night in the cold, empty marital bed, a profound sense of calm washed over me. Their arrogance would be their downfall. They were so consumed by their greed, so certain of my weakness, that they hadn't seen the quiet storm gathering. They had no idea what was coming. If you've been following my story, you know things have been getting intense. The disrespect, the betrayal, it just keeps building. You won't believe what happens next as I finally set my plan in motion. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single part of this unfolding drama. Like and share this video, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. As October settled in, bringing with it the crisp air and changing leaves, Seraphina dropped any pretense of niceness. Her polite smiles vanished, replaced by open irritation and a demanding tone. "Eleanor, could you please wash my cashmere sweaters?" she'd say, thrusting a pile of delicate garments at me, complete with detailed instructions on water temperature and drying methods. "And make sure you use the special wool detergent." She treated me like a hired maid, often leaving her dirty dishes for me to clean, expecting me to pick up after her without a word. I followed her instructions meticulously, washing her clothes, cooking their meals, and cleaning their messes. My hands, once busy tending to my family, now served my husband's mistress. Every condescending request, every snippy comment, was duly noted in my small journal, along with the date and time. I snapped discreet photos of the increasingly extravagant changes to the house. New artwork, discarded heirlooms, expensive gadgets. I continued to record snippets of their conversations whenever possible. This meticulous documentation was for Maggie, who assured me I was building an airtight case. "Just be patient, Eleanor," she advised during our clandestine calls. "Let them make the first move. The more they overplay their hand, the stronger your position becomes." The catalyst for their final move arrived one Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, humming softly, when I heard Seraphina's voice, sharp and furious, emanating from Arthur's study. "Why haven't the assets been moved yet, Arthur?" she practically screamed. "It's been weeks. You keep making excuses." Arthur's voice was placating, defensive. "Seraphina, darling, I told you, there are legal considerations, tax implications. It's not as simple as snapping your fingers." "Legal considerations?" she scoffed. "Or is it that you're stalling? Are you getting cold feet? Is Eleanor becoming a problem after all?" Her suspicion was a dagger, hitting Arthur where it hurt. "No, absolutely not," Arthur insisted, his voice rising in frustration. "Eleanor is not a problem. She trusts me implicitly." He paused, then his voice dropped, a manipulative tone I knew too well. "Look, I've scheduled a meeting with George Davies for Friday. We'll go in together. I'll make sure he understands the urgency. We'll restructure everything into our names, including the house. It's time." My heart gave a triumphant leap. Friday. George Davies. Everything into their names. It was happening. Their plan was clear. They intended to pressure George Davies, Arthur's longtime financial advisor, into transferring all my legally owned assets into their joint control, effectively stripping me bare. What they didn't know was that George Davies had already been contacted by me. Weeks ago, I had arranged a private meeting with him, laying out Arthur's increasingly erratic behavior and my deep concerns about financial exploitation. George, a man of integrity, had listened carefully, promising to act only on my explicit instructions, knowing full well who the legal owner of the assets truly was. He was prepared. The next morning, Arthur was in a buoyant mood. "Seraphina, darling, we need to make sure you look the part for Friday's meeting," he announced. "We're going shopping. A sophisticated outfit, something from Street John's." He wanted her to exude an air of professional authority, an image to intimidate George into compliance. They left in high spirits, their laughter echoing through the house. As soon as they were gone, I picked up the phone. "George?" I said, my voice steady. "It's Eleanor. Just confirming our meeting for Friday. Arthur and Seraphina will be there. Remember our conversation. Stick to the plan." George is calm. "Understood." Eleanor, "Don't you worry," brought a strange, almost serene calm over me. The end of my ordeal was finally in sight. The trap was set. Arthur and Seraphina returned a few hours later, laden with shopping bags, their faces glowing with excitement. Seraphina was carrying a sleek Street John's suit bag. Their laughter filled the hallway, but it died down abruptly when they saw me sitting quietly in the living room, reading. Arthur's smile faltered. Seraphina's triumphant smirk, however, remained fixed. I looked up, meeting their gaze with a soft, knowing expression. "New clothes?" I asked, my voice polite, almost innocent. "You know, Arthur always did like shiny new things." The subtle jab landed. Seraphina's smirk faltered, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. Arthur quickly cleared his throat, dismissing my comment. That night, Arthur was unusually attentive, fussing over me, asking if I needed anything, a clear attempt to lull me into a false sense of security before Friday. Seraphina, on the other hand, was barely able to contain her impatience. I saw her repeatedly checking her watch, her eyes darting towards the clock, eager for Thursday to end, eager for the day I would become completely irrelevant. While they were preoccupied, I secretly gathered the last pieces of evidence for Maggie. Credit card statements for Seraphina's extravagant purchases, more photos of the house's transformation, and a final, carefully recorded conversation where they discussed their future plans in explicit detail. Every piece of their betrayal was meticulously captured. By Thursday evening, the air in the house was thick with their palpable excitement. I heard them toasting in the study, their voices giddy with anticipation. "To our future, darling," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "Soon, everything will be ours." Seraphina's delighted giggle followed. They were utterly oblivious, completely unaware that their future was about to unravel, that the trap they thought they were setting for me was actually closing in on them. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, a crisp autumn day belying the storm about to break. Arthur was humming a cheerful tune as he prepared for the meeting, oblivious to the impending disaster. Seraphina spent an entire hour in front of the mirror, meticulously applying her makeup, her face a mask of polished determination. She emerged from Clara's redecorated room, now her own, looking sharp and confident in her expensive new Street John's suit. Arthur checked his Rolex, the heavy gold watch I had given him for our 25th anniversary. "Time to go, darling," he said, beaming at Seraphina. "George is expecting us." As they walked towards the front door, Arthur paused, a flicker of something unreadable. Perhaps guilt, perhaps just a fleeting thought, crossing his face. He turned to me. "Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than usual, "we'll talk about the future, about arrangements, when I get back." He said it with an air of finality, as if my fate would be decided after their meeting. I simply nodded, my gaze steady. I watched them walk out, Seraphina sliding into the passenger seat of Arthur's luxury car, the seat where I had sat for decades. The car pulled away, disappearing down the tree-lined street. They were on their way to their reckoning. The moment the car was out of sight, I called Maggie Reynolds. "They're on their way," I said, my voice calm, steady. "It's time." The next 2 hours passed in a strange haze. I moved through the house, reclaiming small territories. I straightened the family photographs Seraphina had tossed aside, arranging them back on the mantelpiece. I watered the neglected houseplants, bringing life back to their drooping leaves. I ran my hand over the worn velvet of my reading armchair, a piece Seraphina had tried to banish to the basement, and a quiet sense of ownership settled over me. At exactly 11 o'clock, I imagined the scene unfolding in George Davies's pristine office. Arthur, no doubt, was explaining their restructuring plans with a confident flourish. Seraphina, radiating ambition in her new suit, was probably smiling, her eyes fixed on the promise of wealth, and George, professional and composed, would be listening, his expression neutral, giving nothing away. Then, The phone rang. It was Maggie. "They've just left George's office, Eleanor," she said, her voice laced with amusement. Arthur looked like he'd seen a ghost. The girl was practically running. Maggie quickly relayed the details. George had, as planned, played along with Arthur's initial demands. He had listened to Arthur's elaborate plans for joint ownership, for transferring everything into his and Seraphina's names. Then, with a polite but firm tone, George had explained the legal situation. He had pulled out the original transfer documents from 5 years ago, complete with Arthur's signature, clearly showing that all assets, the house, the business, the investments, the lake cabin, were legally and unequivocally in my name. Arthur's demand for joint ownership was not only rejected, it was impossible without my consent. Seraphina went white as a sheet. Maggie continued, enjoying the story. She started shouting, demanding proof, saying Arthur had lied to her. Arthur was stammering, trying to explain, but she just stormed out of the office, furious. He scrambled after her, looking utterly bewildered. Less than 20 minutes later, I heard the screech of tires outside our house. The car door slammed shut with a violent bang. Seraphina emerged first, her face contorted with rage, shouting at Arthur, who was trailing behind her, looking utterly defeated. I calmly walked into the living room and settled into my favorite armchair by the fireplace, the very one Seraphina had tried to banish. I waited. Seraphina burst through the front door, her eyes blazing, finding me sitting there. "You!" she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger. "You knew all along, didn't you, you manipulative old witch?" I held her gaze silently, not a muscle in my face moving. Arthur entered, his face ashen, looking utterly broken. "Eleanor," he stammered, his voice weak. "Eleanor?" "I can explain." My voice, when it came, was calm, measured, cutting through the chaos. "Explain what, Arthur? How you plan to throw away 42 years of our life together for a woman less than half your age? Or how you forgot that everything we built, everything that matters, is legally in my name?" Seraphina whirled on Arthur, her fury momentarily forgetting me. "You told me everything was yours," she screamed, hitting his chest with her fist. "You lied! You absolute liar!" Arthur tried to protest, to form words, but none came. I cut him off, my voice quiet but firm. "You never thought, did you, Arthur? You never thought of me at all." Arthur stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time in months. The woman he had taken for granted, the woman he had dismissed as harmless, was sitting there, calm and powerful, holding all the cards, his face crumpled. Seraphina, seeing his defeat, jabbed him again. "You've ruined everything, all your grand plans. You don't even control your own money, you pathetic old man." She turned back to me, venom in her voice. "You manipulative old witch." "You both saw what you wanted to see," I replied, my voice steady. "An oblivious old woman. An easy mark." Arthur, completely defeated, finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Eleanor, can't we work something out?" I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. "Work something out, Arthur? Will you send Seraphina away? Or will you continue to pretend to love her and live out this pathetic charade?" Seraphina let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "There's nothing to cash out, Arthur," she snarled. "She owns everything. You have nothing. You promised me a future, a life of luxury, and you gave me nothing but humiliation." She grabbed her expensive handbag and stormed towards the door. "And you know what the worst part is?" she spat, turning back for one final, vicious blow. "I actually started to care about you, Arthur. What a waste." The front door slammed shut with a reverberating bang, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. Arthur stood frozen in the middle of the living room, devastated, his grand dreams shattered around him. I felt no satisfaction, no joy in his anguish, only a profound, deep weariness. Arthur stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief, refusing to accept the reality that had just slammed shut the door on his future. "She'll calm down," he mumbled, almost to himself, though his voice was barely a whisper. "She'll come back. She just needs time to understand the situation." I looked at him, my expression cold, unyielding. "The situation? Arthur?" I repeated, my voice devoid of warmth. "You mean the fact that you meticulously plotted to steal everything from me? That situation?" He took a step towards me, his hands reaching out, then dropping. "Eleanor, I didn't mean to hurt you," he whispered, a desperate plea in his voice. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. And yet, here we are. Through the window, I saw Seraphina get into an awaiting Uber, her face still etched with fury, not once looking back at the house, or Arthur, or the life she thought she was stepping into. She was gone. I stood up, my shoulders straight, my spine feeling impossibly strong. "Now, you pack your things, Arthur," I said, my voice clear and firm, leaving no room for argument. "Maggie will be sending divorce papers tomorrow morning." Arthur's head snapped up, genuine shock replacing his earlier denial. "Divorce? You're throwing me out? After everything we've been through?" 42 years, Eleanor." My reply was immediate, powerful, and utterly definitive. "No, Arthur. You threw us out weeks ago. You just didn't bother to tell me." The words hung in the air, a final, unarguable truth. 1 year later, the divorce was finalized. It was a long, arduous process, but with Maggie's expert guidance and the mountain of evidence I had painstakingly collected, the outcome was clear. I kept the house, the lake cabin, and the majority of our investments. Arthur received a settlement, enough to start over, but certainly not the lavish lifestyle he had envisioned with Seraphina. When Maggie asked if I felt satisfied, if I regretted not taking absolutely everything, I simply told her, "I only wanted peace, Maggie. Not everything." My new beginning started slowly, thoughtfully. The first change was my bedroom. I replaced the vast, empty king-sized bed with a comfortable queen, a size that felt right for just me. I painted the walls a calming seafoam green, a color that evoked serenity and new growth, washing away the muted tones Arthur had preferred. The second change was long overdue. I called Clara. I sat her down and finally, gently, told her everything. The betrayal, the plan, Seraphina, the true ownership of the assets. Clara was heartbroken, furious, and ultimately, deeply supportive. She, her husband, and my 2 grandchildren visited soon after. Together, we systematically purged the house of Seraphina's influence, packing up the modern art, donating the exercise bike, restoring the living room to its former warmth. In the garden, we planted new flowers, bright and vibrant, a symbol of our renewed family and hope. I considered selling the house, but then realized it was truly mine now, on my terms. I would stay. The third change was for myself. At 66, I enrolled in art classes at the local community center. I hadn't painted since college, but the moment the brush touched the canvas, a long dormant passion reignited. It was a joyful rediscovery, a part of myself I had neglected for decades. A year into my classes, I held my first exhibition at a small local gallery. To my surprise, Arthur appeared. He stood at a distance, watching the other attendees admire my work. He nodded respectfully towards me, a silent acknowledgement, and then, without a word, he left. Seeing him felt like watching a movie about someone else's life, a distant memory that no longer held power over me. The fourth change was the most profound. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I discovered my own preferences, unburdened by Arthur's tastes. I ate what I wanted, watched the films I enjoyed, and settled into a daily rhythm that was solely mine. I made new friends, intelligent and inspiring women who brought laughter and fresh perspectives into my life. 1 year to the day after Seraphina had first walked into my home, a letter arrived. It was from Arthur. His handwriting, once so familiar, now seemed strange. He apologized, deeply, for his selfishness, his cruelty, his blindness. He acknowledged my strength, my dignity, and the profound mistake he had made. I read the letter once, then again. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. I understood that some wounds heal best when left alone. When you allow the past to be just that, the past. That spring, I hosted a garden party. The newly planted flowers bloomed in vibrant hues, and the house buzzed with the cheerful chatter of my new circle of friends, women who had found their own strength, their own paths. We toasted to new beginnings, to old wisdom, and to the endless possibilities that life still held. Standing in my garden, surrounded by the beauty I had cultivated, I reflected on my journey. There were no regrets, no lingering bitterness, only gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for the unexpected twists that revealed true strength, and for finally remembering that I was always stronger than I thought. My home, once a battlefield, was now a sanctuary, filled with new memories and the promise of a life lived fully, completely, and truly, on my own terms.